You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast on a Friday night at 11 o'clock. Very late, as we usually do. But you know what? This is the fun part, right? After a long work week, maybe you guys have had, like a brutal week or whatever. You guys can come in, you can sit down, you can talk some Star Wars with us. This is our time. And tonight, we actually have a pretty interesting show. Screen Rant, once again, has pretty much suggested 10 people who could actually play Princess Leia in a situation where they recast her. Now, of course, we did a show at one point. Did we ever do a full show about recasting her, or was that just stuff that we just kept bringing up? You know what I mean? It's like, I could have sworn that we did a whole show on it.
I'm not entirely sure. We might have talked about it in the sense of the Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah,
Like,
maybe that was
should
it.
they
Yeah, like
recast?
after the Last Jedi or something. Yeah, maybe that was
Yeah.
it. I don't know. It's funny because it's not a bad problem to have. I mean, we've actually done so many of these shows now that that they're starting to blend together. Which is, I mean, again, that's a really good problem to have. But yeah, we're looking at 10 choices of different actors that could play Leia as told by Screen Rant. I mean, we could have just come up with our own list, but a lot of times, we're just like you guys. I mean, we watch different YouTube shows or, anything that's streaming or on television that's related to Star Wars. A lot of times we read a bunch of stuff, and sometimes it's fun to just, hey, let's bring this to the group and let's check out some of these choices. Of course, if you haven't done so, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Hit the like button. That's very important to the algorithm. That's one of the things that we wanted to mention. Again, get that out of the way. Of course, we'll probably bring it up again at the end of the show, but you guys know how it goes. So, I don't know. Before we start to reveal Screen Rant's choices, let's just deal with the big elephant in the room here. Do you actually think they should even recast her at this point, or do you think that they should just maybe leave it alone as far as any stories with her?
Yeah, I think that is a big question. And I would say yes. We do need to, recast her. I know that, a lot of fans are, maybe up in arms about it. And, I understand. But, if you're going to tell more stories, in this universe, sometimes it's kind of hard. It's hard to skate around it, depending on where you're telling the story. I mean, if you're telling it post Rise of Skywalker, sure, you can do without Leia.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're doing anything prior to, it's kind of hard to kind of keep her name or not seeing her. I mean, they've been clever so far as mentioning her, like they did in Ahsoka. When she's like, oh well, General Leia or General Organa, has said this or whatever the case may be, and it's like, all right, let you know that her presence is still around, but obviously we're not physically seeing her. But I think it would be time to, especially after our last episode when we were talking about you know bringing in other people to play like Luke and Han, and I mean you have to bring Leia in as well.
Well, and that's what I was going to say. I mean, it's one of those things where it really depends on what you're trying to do. If you're trying to move beyond the Skywalker saga, like what they're going to do with this upcoming Rey movie, which, I don't know, we might do a show on that too, because there's like a title that's come out that's rumored to be a leak, and, we might be seeing this thing sooner rather than later. But if they're going to do stories that are outside of that are beyond the Skywalker saga, or maybe stuff that's like way before, like Knights of the Old Republic, the High Republic, stuff like that, sure, you don't really need to recast her. However, and this goes into what you were saying. I'm sorry, it's like there's this like hot spot on my head that I don't know where that's coming from. It's like driving me insane, but I digress. The point being that if they are going to do a lot of stories that are within the time period of the Skywalker saga, we're talking anything maybe from post episode 3 all the way up through episode 9, then yeah, it's kind of like you said, she's too big of a figure. I mean, she's not just some minor character, you know? I mean, she's like, I don't know, the second in command pretty much. Right. I mean, now sure, you can do the whole cheesy thing, right, where, well, you know, Leia's off on a mission, or, you know, she's off in a meeting somewhere. I mean, you can keep doing that. You can, like what you said, like what they did with Ahsoka, you could basically say, look, she's just off somewhere, or she's not available or whatever, and you can maybe frame a story around her without necessarily featuring her. The only problem with that, though, is that depending on the stories that you're trying to tell and depending on where you're going, I mean, you can only do that gimmick for so long. You know, you can't have this woman continuously out on missions, right?
Well, not only that, I mean, I also feel like you sacrifice, you know, like how much greater would the story be if you just put her in there? You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like you have to look at the consequences of it. It's like, okay, we could do it, but okay, if the story's going to suffer for it, or man, the story will be so much, either or, like it could be really good or really bad. You have to really look at that. Like, okay, is it best to leave Leia out in this type of situation because it'll be bad for the story? Or if it would truly enhance the story, do we put her in? But, you know, like, okay, now how do we do it? Do we recast? Do we, do a de-aging type thing? You know, and that's where, I feel like where we are right now, especially in the world of AI, there's so many different, like, okay, well, we want our Carrie Fisher, we want our Princess Leia to still keep that role. So just de-age her like you do with everybody else, like you did Harrison Ford for Indiana Jones, or like you did, Michael Douglas in, Ant-Man, Wasp and Ant-Man, or, why don't you just do that? And then, of course, now with the technology of, with the AI, with the voice thing, it's like, okay, I'm sure there's probably enough, stuff maybe they can glean to actually use for her voice. But once again, is it going to take people out of it? Is it, is it going to be too jarring? Those type of things. And can you do the things that you really need to do with the character? Or is it best to honestly just reboot?
Well, and then there's a couple,
reboot, but
well, that factors into it too, though, because a couple of shows ago we talked about rebooting the series.
Sure.
So if you do, man, this cough thing is still with me. If you do something that's, say, you got Alden Ehrenreich, Sebastian Stan, you do some reboot of Star Wars or whatever, well, then it makes sense to recast completely. But another thing you got to look at, I think what you suggested is probably going to happen once the technology gets a little bit further. Because like you said, right now, there's still a little bit of clunkiness that takes you out of it sometimes. And I think that it doesn't have far to go, but it needs to get a little bit further before you can actually maybe rely on the whole de-aging /AI voice thing. Because again, you don't necessarily have to do the AI video part, although that's coming up as well at some point, where you don't even have to de-age. You just use a complete AI version. But what they could do, very similar to what they did with Harrison Ford, because they have enough stuff of Carrie Fisher, I'm sure, to pull it off, where you use actual, it's kind of like using footage of her, but then they're filling in the blanks. That's what they did with Harrison Ford in the latest Indiana Jones. It was de-aging, but it wasn't so much CGI. It was like his eyes, nose, mouth, something like that. But then they they would find footage of him that matched their lighting scenarios and the angles, and they digitally put that in there, and that's the reason why it looks so convincing. Now, in my opinion, it would have been better if they had just gone a step further and then also used an AI voice, because the problem is you now have this like 80-year-old man voice coming out of this 40-year-old video. I mean, that was a little bit jarring. I mean, at least when Mark Hamill did it, because he's a voice actor, he was able to, in a weird, bizarre sort of way, he was able to mimic his younger self. But
That's
he had
crazy.
to. I know.
That's how you know you're really good at what you do, when you can actually mimic. Because like most people can mimic other people, but to mimic yourself is like,
Well,
how
it
do you
just
do
kind of,
that?
well, and not only that, but it's like, well, if you can do that, then maybe just do that. Right? I mean, if I could sound like the way I did when I was, like 25 or something, then I probably would. I don't know. I don't know if I really sound that much different, maybe a little bit lower pitched or something, but so maybe I'm on my way there. I don't know. But another thing though, and this goes into the recasting discussion that you were talking about, is that I am going to even say something a little controversial here. Big shock.
Okay.
I think they should have recast her for episode 9. It was a nice tribute and all, but if you think about it, this goes into your point.
Though?
The whole thing. The whole thing, because there was, granted, I know there was Colin Trevorrow and, what he had. Remember, I'm not talking about episode 8. I'm talking about 9, when they just fused together a bunch of unused scenes and clips and stuff like that and try to shoehorn that in. Where the original idea, now granted, I know that J.J. Abrams took it over from Colin Trevorrow, but J.J. would have kept some of that if he could have. But the problem is that, there was a lot more that episode 9 was supposed to be Leia's movie, like episode 7 was Han, 8 was Luke. 9 was supposed to feature Leia quite heavily. Yeah. And that was one of the things that was happening, that even in JJ's mind, he was like, we were having a hard time getting around this. And that's when he went and said, well, let's see if we have any unused footage and maybe I can make it work. But even if you make the argument that you wouldn't have expanded her character as much, it was so obvious what they were doing. It's like you could have expanded those scenes. Even the few scenes that she was in, you could have expanded them. I mean, sure, it was a nice tribute to Carrie Fisher and all, but I don't know. I in some ways think that it would have been smarter. Even though I get it, it would have been kind of weird because you basically started out the trilogy with all the original characters. So, and I know we did a show on this. I know we did a show where we asked whether or not they should have just not used her at all and pulled the whole General Organa's on a mission. Or, I mean, they could have just done that, right? And just been like, well, she's off and, oh, by the way, she died. They could have done that, but I don't know. I think that there's a certain clunkiness in that although it was a nice tribute, I wouldn't have minded seeing it for episode 9. So I'm on board now if they want to recast her.
I don't know if I would have had a recast for 9. I mean, I think the footage that they had. I mean, now if you're, like you said, if they're doing a whole movie centered around her, then yeah, you kind of would have to. But I mean, I think what they did for 9 was fine. Yeah, because I don't see who's gonna play like a older version of Leia.
Oh, you know what? There was who was it that they were thinking of that they brought up? Because this is a big discussion after her death. I mean, after a suitable amount of time, of course. But somebody had a similar to list to what we're going to bring tonight eventually is is basically like here. We'll get there, people. We'll get there. Just, have some patience. It's a long setup, right? So they actually had, I don't know, like 5 actors that could have played Leia in episode 9 kind of a thing. And there was one in particular that I'm like, oh, dude, that would have been perfect. And I can't remember who it was. Like, I'm at a loss of who it was. Let me get to a couple of these chats, and then we can start to get into this list. So Ted Adam Green says, I vote recast the trio and move ahead with Heir to the Empire, along with the rest of the Ahsoka Mando gang, and forget the sequels. Well, I would be totally on board with that, to be honest. Although, I've been saying a lot of controversial stuff lately. I mean, I'm all for rebooting the trio. I mean, people are going to wonder, like, wow, you really were with Star Wars from the beginning? Because there's a lot of people who weren't that would be against that. But maybe it's because I've been with it since the beginning. I've lived with it long enough, and I can see, especially reading a lot of the expanded universe, a lot of the new canon novels, like I see the weaknesses, and it's almost like the caveats outweigh, or I'm sorry, the benefits of actually rebooting outweigh the caveats of rebooting, if that makes sense. And I would almost say that is definitely true with the recasting, because it's basically down to you either don't have Leia in the stories or you recast. It's that simple. I mean, they're not going to tell any stories around, the time of like The Force Awakens or any of the sequel trilogy movies. So we're talking like probably Mandoverse timelines. And they could do that. They could reboot they could just get Alden Ehrenreich, Sebastian Stan, get somebody to play Leia, and okay, there you go. There's your Han, Luke, and Leia that you can now tell new stories, and maybe you do Heir to the Empire. I wouldn't be opposed. All right.
Yeah,
So David says, of course, hello, gentlemen, TGIF, it's Star Wars Day. He goes on to say, the princess is irreplaceable. The way she was back then, women don't act like that in movies anymore. The golden era of real female feminine heroes is over. Well, I would certainly 100% agree with that. I mean, but again, it comes down to the writing. I mean, sure, Carrie Fisher was a little bit spunky anyway, so I mean, it really wasn't much of a stretch given her real personality, but they could write it that way. I mean, there have been movies that have come out recently where granted, it's not many of them, but they're out there where they do have, like more of a classic female hero type of a thing, or heroine. Heroine sounds good.
Yes.
I don't want to get too enamored, but I'm just saying. All right, so let's go with this list. This is what Screen Rant. What we'll do is we'll see who these people are. We'll figure out who they are and whether or not they're going to make a good choice here. We'll all do this together. It's sort of like a group assignment, if you will. Because that's what this show's about, right? We discuss all things Star Wars.
We need a board, like a whiteboard.
Oh, I've actually thought of that. I mean, there's people were doing this for a while. Like they were counting down different things or something like that. There was it was almost like in a tree type of a thing. And there was software that did that, and I was looking into that because I thought, like, when we're doing stuff like this software would have been perfect for that, especially for people to participate. But, I don't remember if it was just like I couldn't get it to interface with vMix or something. I don't know. But it's still something that I wouldn't mind doing. So, that's a good point. All right, so number 10. Number 10 choice is Olivia Cook. So, she was in, help me out.
Oh, Olivia Cook. She's definitely a Game of
She
Thrones,
she was
Bates
she in Game of Thrones?
Motel.
I thought she was
I
in.
mean, I'm not Game of Thrones.
Was it
House of the
House of the
Dragon.
Dragon?
House of the Dragon. My
Yeah,
fault.
House of the Dragon.
They kind of all run
Yeah,
together
I
for
know.
me.
It's like, well,
But
and the
yeah,
problem is a lot of times they, and yeah, okay, yeah. So I mean, and the thing about her is that yes, she would probably be able to capture, in my mind, like the emotional essence of Leia, like some of the maybe the subtleties and stuff like that. Because I remember, I believe, it's been a minute. I think she played in the House of the Dragon. I think she played the king's wife or something like that. She ended up like marrying him or something, and she was like
well,
friends with the sister. Um,
oh, I know you're talking about.
and I
Yeah,
mean, and Olivia's like she would probably be a good choice actually, and she has a similar look because that's another thing too. This is something that I think
yeah,
people really. There's some people on this list where I'm like, really?
yeah, exactly. Like
You
you would have
know?
to do a lot in makeup
Hmm.
or something like that to really. And that's like, and there's one that I believe like look wise and personality wise, she's perfect.
Hmm.
But body and appearance, like you would have to age her up actually.
Oh, I think I know who you might be talking about.
But we'll get to that
We'll
when
get
we
to
get
that.
to her.
We're getting there. So yeah, I think honestly that Olivia would actually be now. Again, what's really funny about this is that if I were creating my own top 10, none of these people would have been in it. I'm just
Oh,
saying.
really?
Really? I mean,
Wow.
probably not. Because I know, like, one of my big choices would be Millie Bobby Brown, and spoiler, alert, she's not in any of this list. And yet she's been one who is actually, her name has been thrown around. And I mean, you'll have to stay till the end of this thing, obviously. But the number one choice would probably be maybe my number two. So Screen Rant's number one would probably be my number two, which would surprise a lot of people once it's revealed who it is. But yeah, I mean, I didn't really think of Olivia as one of the people to do it, but I think she could probably handle it.
Yeah, I think she could kind of handle it. I mean, she's got the right shape.
We
she
we sound so terrible.
Look, I'm a guy. I'm not going to apologize for it.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's like
she's got the right shape for it. She's got the right face. She has the right attitude, like because she can be, feisty and spunky.
Exactly,
as we've seen in House of the Dragon. So yeah, there's that because I think all those things to part into it, into becoming a character. It has to be believable.
Well, and the other thing too is that because she's the role that she plays in the House of the Dragon, she kind of has that whole regal thing down, So I mean, if they want to go back a little bit into that more princess era, because as we've talked about, I mean, it really depends. You also have to find somebody who could play Leia in all eras. That's something that I don't think a lot of people talk about when they talk about a recasting. Is that, well, you might think of a specific, okay, in between, I don't know, like A New Hope and Return of the Jedi or something like that or whatever. But I mean, you need to find somebody who could basically cover the whole gamut, because even if you look at Leia's character from A New Hope to Empire Strikes Back, there was growth there. And there was definitely growth between Empire and Return of the Jedi.
We saw that on the barge ship on display.
That was the growth of the male audience. That's a different kind of thing. That's a completely unrelated thing. You're right, exactly. But that's another point. You got to find somebody who's going to look good in a metal bikini.
Yeah.
So
Well,
she
I
could,
think, you know, well, I think that, and that's what I'm saying. Like, you know, it's like no different than how women felt with, you know, Alden Ehrenreich, you know, playing Han Solo. Like, you have to have that look. You have to have that rugged, handsome,
yeah,
you
you got to
know,
pull it
but you have
off.
to have you can't be too bulky. You can't be too big like a Jason Momoa or something like that because that wouldn't fit. But you can't be too skinny and, you know, like, you know, Robert Pattinson or something like that. So you kind of have to find a nice balance. You can't be too tall. You can't be too short. You have to literally have the shape to play
Yeah.
some of these characters
Oh
for it to
yeah,
be believable. So, but I think
absolutely.
Olivia Cook definitely could do that, and like she definitely has the acting chops by being in the House of Dragon.
Yeah.
It's in having a person who has more because Leia is feisty. Having someone who has more of a dramatic range, I think, would also serve the character well. Just you may not use it all, but just the fact that you know you kind of have it to pull on, and they can just kind of pull that out of almost like thin air for them. It's really helpful.
Absolutely, because it's like you said, you have to be able to balance. There's that certain, feistiness, spunkiness, like what we talked about, which of course reflected Carrie Fisher's personality anyway. But then you
Anyway,
also have a little
the
bit of a
tender side.
dramatic thing. So there's the drama, there's the tender, almost romantic side.
Hmm.
There's, the more regal side. There's this, and then of course there's a humorous, funny side too.
Yeah,
She
and then
had
it's the
great comedic
dominant.
timing.
Yeah, and then you also have the dominant, like when she had that take charge, like, all right, into the garbage chute, flyboy. You know
Yeah,
that
well,
the
exactly.
whole you know how she bossed up at Tarkin. I mean, there's a lot of moments where she turns on this whole like, okay, I'm in charge. I kind of know what to do. You have to have that as well.
Well, and I would count that as part of the whole spunkiness kind of, that thing, because it goes into that. But even more importantly, besides the range and all that, you have to be able to pivot between all of these things. Like, it's not just having the range, but it's being able to just, on a dime, react to the situation. And everybody forgets that Carrie Fisher actually was a writer.
Hmm.
Not only did she write a bunch of books, but she was actually a script doctor. I mean, people would come to her with their scripts and she would punch them up. She would either add more comedy to them, or, she would fix certain things or whatever. So, I mean, she brought that sensibility to her acting. And I think that even in the sequel trilogy, when she was completely rusty, I mean, that was one of the things that she was a little bit of fearful of. It's like, well, I don't know. I haven't
Hmm.
really done this in a while. She fell right into it.
Hmm.
All right. So our next number 9. Number 9 is Alicia Vikander. Now, I remember her from the Tomb Raider movie,
Yep, she's from
because
Tomb
I
Raider.
was a big fan of the 2018 Tomb Raider movie. And I know she played
She's in
Lara
Jason
Croft.
Bourne.
All right. Yes.
Um, a Royal Affair, which shows you that people miss that side of things.
Well, and I'm seeing a
Um,
theme in that already, right? Is that
right.
when Screen Rant put this list together, they obviously were trying to find people that also had that sense of royalty, and maybe played those kind of roles in order to be a part of that same pedigree, in order to establish that. So that's
And
cool.
she's also the wife of Michael Fassbender too. So
Oh no, that I didn't know. So you learn something new
mhm.
every day on this thing. Let me just get to a couple of chats before, well, actually one chat, and it's David. He says, I know Daryl didn't just say uh, Twilight is too skinny, but he ain't too skinny to be Batman. See, here we go. Talking about Robert Pattinson?
Yeah.
It's funny
But
because
he
we always bring up Star Trek at some point during the show. He always brings up Batman
brings up
during the show.
yes.
Like, it's always this thing. Like, okay, We're not taking the bait this time.
No, we're gonna move forward. I don't think that she's more of a Leia though. To me, she doesn't strike me
So here's
as
my thing
Leia.
with her. I mean, I would agree with that, but I would think that you would cast somebody like her or her if you were going to try to take the role in a slightly different direction, right? Because there's two approaches that you could do with this thing. You know, you could either try to recast Leia as close to Carrie Fisher as possible in look, in, acting, kind of what we were just talking about with Olivia, right?
Hmm.
You could do something like that where you're like, all right, she kind of looks like Carrie Fisher did. You could cast according to that. Or you could try to go a different route and say, look, we're going to recast this role and we're going to maybe shape it a little bit differently. And so we're going to look for somebody who can maybe play the role a little bit differently, maybe bring a different spin to it. Now, I don't
Hmm.
know. I don't know if I would really want that unless they were going to do that across the board. So, in other words, are you going to tweak Han, Luke, and Leia? Because if you pretty much make Han and Luke similar to Harrison Ford and Mark Hamill, but then you basically make Leia different, it's
Hmm.
gonna be weird. Because not only
Yeah,
did the three
exactly.
actors have a chemistry, but the characters themselves were written in such a way that they were very complementary.
Yeah, definitely. And that's what I'm saying. Like that's why I don't feel like this particular person with Alicia, I don't think she's a good candidate for
Yeah.
Leia. She doesn't to me, one, she doesn't have the look, number one. Um and not saying, anything against people who are from Sweden or anything, but she has a Swedish look. So she's, so it just kind of throws it all off, and it just even in appearance wise. And so, um,
That would be great. It's like, what are you kidding? You're like Swedish. We can't have that.
it's kind of how I feel about, when everybody was talking about the whole, let's get Idris Elba to play James Bond just because he's British. And I'm like, no.
Yeah, I know. I know.
But okay, let's move
But
on.
you're right. Exactly. Don't want to go down that rabbit hole yet. But the next choice is kind of out there in left field. Now, I could see it, sort of, but this is really, really an out there choice, and that's Jenna Ortega.
See, this is the one that I was just referring to earlier. I
Which
like her
is,
as Leia. I would love to see her play Leia, honestly,
well,
because I
I
think
mean,
she really does look like her,
she
or that she could
does.
be definitely made to look
She
like
can be
Leia.
made to look like her, but more importantly, I don't know, did you see the Wednesday series?
Oh, I love the Wednesdays,
Oh
and
yeah,
that's what I'm saying.
it's
Like the
incredible.
humor, the
Yes.
humor that she has,
Yes.
but then that attitude that she also possesses. I mean, like everything about Jenna Ortega. Like to me, I was like, you know what? This is great. The only problem is that she looks, because she's only 21. She's too young. So you would have to age her
Well,
a little bit, because Leia probably at the end of Return of the Jedi, at least when we're looking and we're talking about because what, Carrie Fisher was probably what, her early 30s.
let's see. So she was 19 when she did A New Hope. All right, so that's around like 77. I'm not counting like when they were making it. It's just like 19 around then.
Really?
So, yeah.
She was
Yeah.
that young? I thought she was a little bit
Yes.
older than that.
No.
Wow.
That's the thing.
Okay.
She was not that old. So I mean, she was like maybe like, I don't know, 25-ish when she did Return of the Jedi. So
Okay.
she wasn't really that much. The problem is, and again, it depends, because here's the thing about Jenna Ortega that's really cool is that when you juxtapose that with also her performance in the Scream movies, the last two,
Mm-hmm.
she obviously has a range, and she obviously has the chops and the ability to cover, I think, the different range of emotions that would be necessary. But about the age thing, it's not so much about her age, I think, it's about her look. It's like, could they make her look a little, because, she's petite, she looks a little bit
Yeah,
younger
she's
than she
short.
does. I mean, look, she looks like 12 here.
Yeah,
you
she's
know?
a little short for Princess Leia.
Yeah, exactly. They'd have to put lifts in her. I mean, again, this is why you
Yeah.
have to be very careful, is that you could sort of make her look like it a little bit, but I don't know. I think in a lot of ways you would actually have to maybe do too much to sell it. But again, if you were going to maybe do something a little bit different with the character, that the different look would be okay. But again, you have to think in terms of Alden Ehrenreich has already been a younger Han Solo. Donald Glover has already been a younger Lando Calrissian.
Yep.
Even Mark Hamill says you should get Sebastian Stan to play a young Luke Skywalker. So let's just say, for the sake of argument, that's the cast that you're going to lock in for any Star Wars projects for recasting the characters, essentially. Or them playing their younger selves or whatever. Okay, you got to look at how Jenna would look next to those guys.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure.
It'll look very pedophile-ish.
It might be a little creepy. But here's the thing you also have to look at. And this was something that I was thinking about the whole time when, we were putting this list together, and I was thinking about how I felt about each of these people. They have a bunch of Star Wars projects on the slate already. By the time maybe they got to her being Leia, she might look more the part. But again, it's kind of like you might have reached that same body set. Like, she might get older, but she's not going to look any different, kind of thing. You know what I mean? So,
yeah, I mean, because like I said, I'm giving it, even if she between 21 and 24, I don't think you look that much different.
Yeah.
I would say, like, if she was like 28, yeah.
Yeah. It's a tough sell. Now, David's come up with a list of some people that, may fit the bill. Let's take a look and see.
Great. It's going to be the chick from Fast and Furious.
We actually, okay, so before I put it up, who do you think he's got?
Letty from Fast and Furious.
She was in the Dungeons and Dragons movie.
No, I didn't.
Oh, that was a great movie too, by the way. So who do you think he has on there? I mean, even like one actress. He's got four. This is actually kind of fun.
I don't know if he's.
No, these are serious. These are serious choices. This is not.
He's being serious.
Yeah, okay. He's being serious. He's not being funny.
He's not being David. Okay.
He's not being David. He's being.
I don't know, because he probably will put somebody like, who's that who played Captain Marvel?
Brie Larson.
Brie Larson.
I like Brie Larson. I've liked her ever since she was on Community. I mean, I like her as an actress too, don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm not just talking about, okay, all right, I'll stop. Somebody should hose me down or something.
Yeah, man.
I'm in rare form tonight. Yeah, I know, right? I should have taken like a cold shower before this thing. All right, so David's choices are Gal Gadot, Jennifer Lawrence, pre-woke, Zendaya. And then he's talking about the chick that played Gamora, which was
Zoe Saldana?
Yes.
No.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, absolutely not Zoe Saldana. Zendaya, again, you still run into the same problem you have with Jenny Ortega. It's gonna look weird. Gal, she's too tall.
That's exactly what I was thinking. She's just too
Yeah,
tall.
she's too.
She's too
Yeah,
tall. She's nothing like Leia. She would be a good
yeah.
choice if you were going to go in a different direction. I mean, she's got the chops and the range and all that, no doubt.
Mm-hmm.
And Jennifer Lawrence, I don't know. That's a tough one. That's a tough one. I could see, no pun intended, a universe where she would be a decent choice. But I just don't think that she would take out some of the people even on the Screen Rant list. But I'm glad that, David, that you put this in there, because it's something I'm going to ask of all of you guys. Is put your guys' choices, either in the chat now or in the comment section later if you're watching this later. All right, so number 7. Number 7's another Game of Thrones person. Number 7 is Sophie Turner.
Sophie Turner.
So this one's interesting too. I mean, she doesn't really have, like, she has the Leia vibe, but not necessarily the look. That's the only thing.
No. But you know who I would love to see her play?
Mara Jade.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Didn't think about that one, but that's a good
it was like
one.
the first thing I thought of.
But no. A young Mom Mothma.
Oh. Well, we already kind of have. Well, I mean, unless you mean like a younger Mon Mothma. How young do we have to go, though?
I mean, we don't have to. I'm just saying.
I mean,
I'm just saying if they wanted to go there.
It's Mon Mothma in elementary school, everybody. I'd almost watch that. Mon Mothma and the student council.
Right.
It's where she's getting her leadership training from.
Right, exactly. I was safety patrol it. No, but Mara Jade.
No, if you were gonna do,
that's a good one though.
Yeah, the Mara Jade thing, man. I mean, I was starting to think about it. I'm like looking at her, going, okay, now that's a good choice for that.
That's a good one.
She even has a hair for it. You know?
Yeah, that's when you said it, I was like, duh, like why didn't I think of that? Like,
well, I mean, you know, that's the thing too, is that the whole Mara Jade thing, and this is what's funny about that, and I won't go into the weeds with Mara Jade because we're talking about Leia, but the interesting thing about that character is people have been wanting Lucasfilm to canonize her now for a long time, and they just haven't, and there's a lot of people that have gotten on board with saying, hey, that ship has sailed. With what they've done with the sequel trilogy now, you can't really do it. But that's not true. Even if everybody's like, yeah, but I mean, in the books, Luke married her and he had a kid and all this other stuff, it still happened. There was like 30 years in between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens. You could sandwich that relationship, even the kid. But even if you didn't want to do the kid, you could still do that. She could still be the Emperor's hand. I mean, there's a lot of cool like things that you could do with the Mara Jade character, but again, for Mara Jade, Sophie Turner I think would be a good choice. Leia, not so much. Not so much on that one. And you're pretty much in that same camp too, right?
Yeah.
All right. We just want to make sure before we move on, right? All right, so number 6. Kiernan Shipka. Now, this is another choice that I found somewhat interesting. I'm not as familiar with her as far as some of the stuff that she's done.
Yeah, I looked. She was in Mad Men, like the series,
right?
But
and I've seen a few. You know, I've seen a few episodes of it, but it wasn't like I watched it.
Yeah, like consistently enough to really get a vibe off of her. At least not for me.
No, and there was some other series that she did too, wasn't
it? The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, I guess. Like, you know, but
that's it. But I've never seen it.
Yeah, I've never even seen that either. So that's I'm not as well versed on her. But I think just because of some of the films that she's done, maybe I don't know if she's really got the chops to play. You know, I'm gonna just start there. Just looking at some of the films that she's done, I mean, nothing has really stood out to me to like,
Well,
think
David,
that she would go ahead.
I don't know if he was talking about, because this one just popped in, so I don't know if he's talking about her. He's talking about Sophie, which I don't think. But he said, seriously, Jean Grey, horrible choice. She's worse than doing a race swap with Zoe.
Oh, is he talking about Jennifer Gardner?
I don't know.
Yeah,
I have
David,
no
clarify
idea.
that, sir.
Yeah, you got to clarify, man. Are you talking about like when we just did Sophie Turner at number 7? Are you talking about Kiernan? I mean, are you talking about some other thing that we said? What are you talking about? You have to clarify that one. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess she kind of has the look. She sort of has the look, but again, the look is not something that, I mean, it's important, and I think you do have to have that, but the thing about the whole look of everything is that's not the be-all, end-all of the character.
No.
He said the chick that played Jean Grey in that horrible X-Men reboot. Wasn't her, was it? Yeah, I don't know, man. You got us kind of stumped there. We're doing silence.
I think he's talking. Hold on. I think I know who he's talking about.
Yeah, we're looking at. See, this is how you know we're dedicated. It's like when you guys chat stuff in, we actually take it seriously and look it up. Of course, for some people that might be like, "Come on, guys, like move. What's going on?" He said, "Mr. Vance." Oh, he says Mr. Vancel's number 7. Well, yeah, that was. First of all, let me clarify this right now. This is not our list. All right, this list came from ScreenRant.com. All we're doing is we're commenting on their choices. That's it. That's all we're doing. Here are the 10 choices that Screen Rant put on. Because again, I mean, only maybe like a couple of these people would be on my list. And my number 1's not even on this list. So, I mean, let's just get that out of the way. Let's just, establish that. I thought we established that early on, but I guess not. All right, let's go to number 5. Because we don't really know much about this chick anyway. Oh, Maude Apatow, yeah. Okay.
Look, in my opinion.
Huh?
She has a look, in my opinion.
She does. I mean, she definitely does. She has some of that. Like, she kind of has the eyes. I mean, she has the overall look. She's another one. I've seen her around, but again, I'm not as familiar with a lot of the stuff that she's done either. I mean, I know who she is, and so obviously I've heard of her, but I haven't really seen much of anything that she's been in. And again, that's another important point too, is that for all I know, I might actually be on board with some of these people. I said that they're not in my personal, they're not my choices, right? But I might go for them if I saw some of their stuff.
Oh, but to answer David's question, he's talking about Sophie.
That's what I'm saying. When you said it was my number 7. Well, it's not my number 7.
Yeah. Yeah, I know.
I wouldn't, Yeah, don't. Yeah, let's
Eric's
not.
Don't put my name on it.
Don't put my name on this. This is not my list. But yeah, I mean, so she's okay. She's an interesting choice. But again, I'm not. Are you familiar with anything that Maude has done? Is anybody out in the chat right now familiar? Is anybody watching this and, wants to enlighten us in the comment section? Wow, it's just like a teachable moment here.
Well, I have seen her. I mean, she's been in a lot of comedies, so she definitely has like the sarcasm, the wit, that kind of spunk, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Well, she has that definitely. Um, but I don't know if she has the range to play something more in depth. Although she's been on Euphoria, and Euphoria is kind of a dark show, so maybe
All right. Well,
that's a possibility.
David is active tonight, everybody. He says number 5 is horrible. She looks weird. Cute, but not Leia. But I mean, I get that though, because I remember when I first saw her picture, I was just like, whoa. I mean, she was, she's, when you actually look at her, you go, okay, I can see maybe her playing Leia or something, but, that's not your first, at least I don't think it's like the first, um, but again, I mean,
If you Google search her and you go under her images, there's a couple where I could see like, okay, if you put her hair in like those little buns,
mm-hmm.
yeah, I could see her definitely playing Leia.
All right, fair
As far
enough.
as the look goes, yeah.
All right, number 4. Number 4 is Millie Alcock. Now, she's an interesting choice, too, because she's in House of the Dragon. I know who she is.
Mm-hmm.
She's another one that you want to talk about. Like, this is who I actually thought you were talking about. I didn't think you were talking about Jenna Ortega. I thought you were talking about her. Because, I mean, she looks like really young, man.
Yeah.
I mean,
But she's
again,
23 though, and that's
I know, but
I know, but you said she was 19 when she did it. So,
but you know
but
what?
then again,
Everybody
then
looked like
we're talking
40
about
back then too.
Well, yeah, she drank and smoking,
Well,
So.
but I mean, if you look at people, I mean, it's so funny. Like, if you look at people who were 50 back in like the 60s, 70s, or something like that, I mean, they look like they're 60 or 70. I mean, it's just funny that people actually looked older. I mean, it's funny because I'll watch like some of these quote unquote teen comedies from the 70s. Now, granted, I know that a common practice in movies, is what they'll do is they'll like get a bunch of 25-year-olds to play like sophomores, But even then, it was like they all looked. What was a movie I was just watching the other day or like a week ago? Oh, My Bodyguard, Matt Dillon. It was a classic film. But I'm like looking at these guys. I'm like, they look like they're 35. So I mean, there is that where when you were 19 back then, you looked a little bit older maybe than what you were. But now it's almost like the opposite, and you look at her and it's just kind of like, okay, she's another one. She's got the acting chops to pull it off, no doubt. I mean, she's very good in House of the Dragon. I don't know if she's done much beyond that. I'm not sure. That's where she got on my radar, and that's what I'm familiar with her. And that's, again, and that might be based on that, because when you have to carry the fantasy genre, you have to sell that. I mean, you have to, if you're going to be in everybody forgets that Star Wars is sci-fi fantasy. So, when you're in kind of these like sword sorcery type, movies or television shows or whatever, there's a fine line in your performance between making it believable and making it cheesy. It's very easy to give like a sort of a cheesy performance. And a lot of it is you have to, when you're delivering the lines and you're in the scene or whatever, you really have to internalize it and you have to emote it in such a way that it feels real. Because that's what made the original trilogy so amazing, was the fact that it felt grounded. It felt real. It felt like these characters were really saying these things, not just delivering lines. So that was That was pretty cool. All right, so number 3. Number 3 is another Olivia Scott
Mm-hmm.
Welch. All right, so she was in. Oh, let me think. It was a Netflix
Panic.
thing. No. Fear Street. Fear
Yep.
Street. Yes, that
Yep.
I saw. I love that trilogy. If you guys did not see the Fear Street trilogy on Netflix, incredible. It was really good. It was different, but it was good. And she was, she was another one where she really sold it because speaking of giving cheesy performances, horror films are another genre that you really have to sell. That's what made Jamie Lee Curtis's performance in Halloween so special, was the fact that she was authentic. She wasn't the typical scream queen, although she sort of almost invented that, really. But, she was kind of like the original final girl, so to speak. But if you look at a lot of the final girls and say, like, your Friday the 13th and, all the other films, classic though they may be, there's just a little bit more authenticity that Jamie Lee Curtis brought to her role as Laurie Strode. And that's what sold it. And that's part of what makes Halloween such a classic film. And so you do need somebody who could bring some of that authenticity to the role of Leia, because that's exactly what Carrie Fisher did. I mean, I'll never forget when Mark Hamill, was talking about the whole thing with him and Harrison Ford and Carrie, and they're trying to deliver these lines, and they're just, I mean, nobody understands anything that George is writing.
Right.
And of course, Harrison famously said, look, you can write this crap, but you can't say it.
Mm-hmm.
And he was basically saying, like, as an actor, I mean, you can't, I mean, this is just stupid. I mean, they probably felt really dumb saying it. And of course, Mark Hamill will always quote a line that he gave, which was actually cut from the film. And it was fantastic. It's just kind of an example of it. So somebody coming from a background that has some horror films in it and can bring authenticity to that can certainly add some authenticity to Leia. So do you have anything to add about her?
Well, she's also an Agent Carter. That's another series that she was a part of. I think, once again, she has a suitable look. Can she pull off the full range of Leia? That's always going to be the question, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
So it's because, see, the thing about Leia was that, like, she was poised. She was very poised. She was confident, super confident, daring in a lot of ways. And so those are some aspects of that, you also have to include when you're talking about Princess Leia.
Yes.
I mean, and our tribute to when we did for Carrie Fisher when she passed, like, these are some of the things that, we just remarked on, because, it's amazing what she was able to do with that character, especially for that time period, for the early 70s, like I said, it's all about the guy, the action, the big bravado. And the fact that Carrie Fisher was able to hold her own in that space while still being feminine and strong without being, as we always talk about, like, it's like emasculating the others. It was just like, man, so when we're looking at these actresses who are phenomenal in their own right, they're great actresses, and but it
Uh-oh. You froze up. Oh, there you go. You're
oh,
back.
there we go.
Yeah, you're
Those
back.
are some pretty hefty shoes to fill.
Yeah.
When you're talking about Carrie Fisher. So with Olivia, I don't know. Like I said, and that's the thing about some of these actors. Like you have one part of the character, but can you complete the character? And I often liken it, to Superman, right? That's what made Christopher Reeve so phenomenal as Superman, is because he was able to not be just convincing as the Man of Steel, but he was even more convincing as Clark Kent. So you could actually tell that there was a difference between when he's bumbling around and he's got his trench coats on and he's pushing his glasses up and he's colliding into everything and tripping and getting himself caught and stuff. Like it's almost like you're once again Jaleel White. We talked about him, being able to go from bumbling Steve Urkel to now smooth, suave Stefan Urkel. Being able to take one side of it and go to the other, and everybody can't do that. And so when you're talking about someone like Carrie Fisher or Princess Leia, like, okay, some of these actresses, yes, they have the comedic chops, or they have the depth where they have that, they can be feisty and spunky, but they may not be as funny, or have that, like you said, Eric, earlier, timing. That comedic timing is that was Carrie Fisher's thing, because she's naturally a comedian. So, with Olivia, it's a hard one. I mean, I think she's good. She's definitely in the running for it, but we would just have to see.
Yeah, it's going to be with a lot of these people, and I don't know. Well, first of all, we don't know from an official standpoint whether or not Lucasfilm is even really actively trying to recast her. I think this is just something that Screen Rant came up with, like, hey, if they do recast, here's some choices. Now, speaking of that, their number two is she's actually somebody who's come onto the scene that I've always liked, and that is Florence Pugh. Now, she's, of course, as this picture is basically like the climax of Midsummer. If you haven't seen Midsummer is like a really freaky, gets under your skin kind of horror film, but it's not the typical horror movie. In fact, it shares a lot in common with The Wicker Man, and not the Nicolas Cage version, but like the original one with Christopher Lee, another Star Wars alum. And it's somewhat psychological, and there's a lot of symbolism in it, and she really pulls this character off. Of course, a lot of people point to, her Marvel character and, her performance in that, which of course is also good. But I think that it's interesting that her performance in Midsummer just shows like another complete side. And I think she actually started off as a YouTuber. Like, she had a YouTube show and it blew up and everything. And she got somebody's radar and they started casting her and stuff. I'm trying to think of like some of the other stuff she's been in. She was in another like kind of horror-ish type movie too.
Well, the thing is with Florence is also she's also an Oppenheimer.
Yes. That was something that she's done recently. And that's another one too. I mean, actually,
that's what I'm saying. That takes a lot of.
It does, and
she was really
good in that. I mean, really, that Oppenheimer was a great movie, but
yeah, and that's the thing. She's English, but the other thing about her, like, she definitely she can pull off the look. Like, I think she could pull off the look. She's old enough, like she's 27 years old, so she kind of has that more mature look to herself. I think that coupled with the different types of movies that she's done, the range, going from, because she's done fantasy-ish type stuff with the Marvel things. She's in the upcoming Captain America movie, Dune Part 2, Avengers, the Kang Dynasty. She's coming up in that. So she's used to playing in this fantasy box, but then she's also done some dramatic stuff, like I said, like Oppenheimer, Little Women, things like that. And then, like you said, I didn't see Midsummer,
Oh,
but
dude, you should really see that movie. It was so
but
good. And it's like the ending is just so chilling. Like, whoa. I mean, it's definitely more horrific than just about any horror movie. I mean, it's good. It really is good.
but that's what I'm saying. Like, see, when you see an actress who can play in those sandboxes, right?
Mm-hmm.
When they can play in those different areas and arenas and be good, now you're really starting to show like that range and those chops. So coupled with that, with her look being the right age, in my opinion, to play an older Leia, a more seasoned, more tour Leia, um, I think this is a really good choice.
Well, and what's funny about her is that she was one that wasn't really coming up on my radar at all when I was starting to think in terms of my own, like, okay, before I even looked at it, when I just saw the title, where it was
Hmm.
like, oh, top 10 actors that could replace her or whatever. She was never somebody that was in the running for me. Like, I never even considered her. But then when I saw it on the list, it got my mind going, kind of like a lot of the things that you just said, where I started going,
Hmm.
actually, she could pull that off. She would be a good choice. And that's one of the things that I liked about this list, too, is that it did not, how do I want to put this? It stayed away from the obvious choices. Well, kind of. Our number one, which we're going
Yeah,
to get to
obvious.
shortly. That's a little
Yes,
bit of
that's
an
obvious.
obvious choice. Yeah, it's an obvious choice. But for the most part, though, it really did stay away from the obvious choices. Now, of course, you have people that are in the other camp, like our good friend David, who says, fire the people who made this list. But again, it's not like I don't understand that, though, because some of these people you're going, I don't really know.
Right.
Other
Yeah.
ones you're basically saying, all right, yeah, I mean, now that I'm thinking about it, this could be a good choice. But again, it stays away from the obvious ones, which I think is both a strength, but could also be considered a weakness of this list. All right, so without further ado, number one. Number one, of course, is the daughter. The daughter
Billy.
herself. Billy
Yes,
Lord.
Billy Lord.
Yes. And of course,
Yes,
she was
Carrie Fisher's own
own
flesh and
daughter.
blood.
Yes. This is Carrie Fisher's daughter. She is, I mean, she certainly has the look, kind of.
Obviously.
But,
Yes.
I mean, but the only thing about this choice, though, is that she was featured somewhat prominently in the sequel trilogy. Maybe not crazy, but,
Yeah.
it would be
We
kind of
saw her
weird.
face enough
Yeah,
to now see her playing like
right.
Leia.
Exactly. It's like, I don't know.
Yeah. That would be a weird shift in things. But I think that because she's she's the spawn of Carrie Fisher.
You think people could just get over that?
Yeah, not only that, but I mean, it's kind of like, it's kind of like, okay, who better to serve, you know, because this person has lived with that, not only with mom, but the character of Leia, because, she's grown up knowing that her mom is Princess Leia. So I'm sure she's, probably asked questions. She's probably gotten nuances and things that, that most people wouldn't actually be able to have. And then her herself being in the Star Wars franchise, being experienced to that world too. So she kind of gets it, comparatively, with things that her mother might have taught her. So yeah, it's a good. I mean, you're not going to get anybody closer in the sense of like all the things as far as look, understanding the character. We don't know she has her mother's wit or things of that. Like we don't know she has all those little things, but because she's been around her mother, no, she probably can. Because everybody kind of like we all can imitate our parents in some way, shape, or form. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like so because we've been they're our parents. So
Uh,
I don't know,
I'm
but
laughing.
it's
Well, David feels
I can see.
differently.
I can see. Of course he does.
Of course he does. And, of course it's like, don't ever let these people cast a movie. Billie Jean is no Princess Leia, blood or no blood. It just completely.
He completely Pablo's this
Just
everybody's name. I
completely,
love it.
yes. Yeah, it's great. But look, we all know that there's only one Carrie Fisher. Well, in this, there's like 3 of
Yes.
them. But, I mean, we know that. And that's something that you have to let go of, especially when you've lived with a character for as long as we have in the Star Wars franchise. I mean, people like me who go all the way back to 1977, I mean, we're coming up on like 45 years here. Actually, we're beyond 45. So now we're going to be coming up on 50 in a few years. So that's a long time to live with a single character in the role. And it might not have been so bad if she hadn't reprised her role for the sequel trilogy, too. That's something else. Like, if it had just ended after the original trilogy, I think people could have maybe accepted it a little bit more. But the fact that, her, Harrison Ford, Mark Hamill, they all came back as their older selves, I think that even complicated things. So it's a little strange, right? Because you go from like Return of the Jedi, where you have Harrison Ford, and then let's say you have Alden Ehrenreich doing a bunch of Han Solo stuff that takes place in, say, the Mandoverse or a little bit beyond, and then Harrison Ford comes back older. It's a little strange. It's almost like it would have been better to either recast them, period, but then again, if they had done episodes 7, 8, and 9 and had a completely different recast, it would almost made no sense. Everybody was still alive. So it is a bit of a quandary. And those are the kinds of things that you have to look at. I mean, it's almost an impossible situation that Lucasfilm finds themselves in, because no matter who they pick, it's not going to be to everybody's liking. Everybody is going to have their own version of, well, I think they should have picked this person, or they shouldn't have recast him at all. There's only one Leia, and that's Carrie Fisher. I mean, what do you do, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, all in all, like you said, you're not going to please everybody. Someone's going to have an issue with it, and that's fine. But my thing is, we have to move beyond, and I think sometimes these characters or these actors want these characters to live on if they can, but just do them justice. Just make sure, now that these people are gone, don't sully the characters either, so if you're going to put them in something, make sure it's good, make sure it's impactful, just like they would have wanted it to be portrayed.
Well, and again, I mean, you knew we had to bring this up sooner or later. Star Trek, I think, did a really good job with this. In the J.J. Abrams reboot, I mean, I bought Chris Pine as Captain Kirk. It's like, okay, he's younger and he's actually in that same age. This is a really good thing, to where you had William Shatner's performance, and it wasn't like Chris Pine was playing a prequelized. It was, I mean, parts of it were, but it almost occupies the same time period. That's why they had to have like the prime timeline and then, this alternate one. Same thing with Zachary Quinto as Spock. Then they recast Spock yet again when they did Discovery, which carried over into Strange New Worlds. And that guy's really good. I actually like the guy they have in that series better than even Zachary Quinto. So you have examples where this stuff could work. But I think the reason why people have a hard time with it generally, because a lot of times, people point to like James Bond. It's like, well, yeah, but they've been recasting James Bond over and over again for decades. And when it first happened, it was a little jarring, but then after a while, it's kind of like, all right, yeah, we get it. Every, 3 or 4 films or something.
So often,
yeah, we're going to get a new Bond, and everybody's just cool with it, as long as whoever they pick basically fits the profile of the character. And
Yeah.
anytime you have a long-running franchise, you're going to have that kind of an issue. You're going to have the idea where in order to serve the story, you have to do it. You have to recast eventually. Because, number one, you can't just have the same person in the role forever. Eventually, they're going to retire or get sick or die or whatever. So unless you want the story to end with them, and sometimes maybe that's a thing. But other times, I think it is better to, especially in a franchise like this, because you have this whole different world, although it does open up the door too to, well, how come they just don't leave it alone, tell new stories? But
yeah, I mean, we'll see. I mean, definitely let us know what you guys think about some of these actors and actresses. David certainly has.
Dragonfly joined us today.
If you have some of your own that you want to submit, please do. Make sure you submit those in the comment section to let us know. Who do you think would be a good, reasonable facsimile of Leia Organa?
Yeah, that would be a good thing. Leave that in the comment section. Who would be your top? You don't necessarily have to go top 10 unless you want to. But,
Right.
Let's see maybe your top 5 choices. Who are your top 5 choices to play her in a recasting situation? Let us know in the comment section. All right, well, again, this has been great. A great way to spend a Friday night / Saturday morning. Because we always move into, after midnight. But
right.
It's really great that you guys are joining us. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't done so already, because, again, it helps the algorithm and, lets us know you were here. And if you guys have any show ideas or you have any, suggestions or whatever, put those in the comments as well, because we do read. We respond to every one of them. And we'd love to hear from you guys. Don't forget to take our poll in the community tab. We put a couple of them in there already, and people have been voting. Maybe I'll give the results on Monday's show. Speaking of which, have we discussed Monday yet? We've been so many shows ahead, I don't even remember now if we chose that one or not.
We did. I'm trying to think if I
thought we did too. I thought we did, because I remember we said, oh, we'll just hold that off to Monday, and it's like, wow. We actually know what we're going to talk about, all this time in a row. But it's always good to preview it.
Oh, we did talk about the Rey upcoming movie.
Oh, yeah, all right. Well, yeah, we'll do that. So we'll give you guys the title if you haven't read the story yet. We'll give you guys the title, and we'll talk about it. We'll talk about the new Rey movie. And we'll give you guys some information on it, at least what's known, what's technically been leaked. And, we'll go from there. So join us live Monday, 8 o'clock. All right? So till then, I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.